Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of my in-depth series of the lovely Piper PA-28161 Warrior 2 aircraft. One of those ones that I spent a good amount of time on my flight training and got to do some really good solo work in. So in today's video, of course, we're going to be dealing with everything with landing with this aircraft, as well as getting it back down. In our previous videos, we went kind of through the whole process of kind of navigating. We had a little bit of fun with that new avionics update breaking our GPS. Whatever, no big deal. But today, of course, what we're going to do is we're going to get this thing down. And if you look right off my nose, we're just approaching Windham, Connecticut there. Windham is pretty cool. We've got Eastern State University up here. Yukon is actually right off my right, if you can look just a little bit where that break in the world is. And I beat this piece of terrain up so many times, both virtually as well as in the real world. It probably should get an award. Nah. There's people who've done much more damage to that piece of concrete than I have. So we're going to be doing, of course, is we're going to be landing at this airport and kind of going through the whole motions of how do you get the Piper Archer on the ground, Warrior 2 on the ground. Now, there's a couple things that make this plane a little weird. The first one is, if I look at the side, you'll notice my wing shape has got this weird little cranked thing going on here, but it's kind of flat. This is a very, very low drag wing. The earlier versions of the Pipers, of course, had these kind of, they call them the Hershey bar wings, I'm sure you've heard before, and they had this kind of weird, very abrupt kind of flying between the room between flying and not flying was very, very hello. This aircraft, on the other hand, is very smooth when you transition from those two particular states. The problem with this airplane is our little tail here. Because this is an all-moving, I love the anti-servo tab, by the way. Because this is an all-moving tail that we're going to be dealing with, it becomes very, very, very easy to pull through and go right into a stall with this aircraft on landing. So it's one of those things that you have to do. The other issue with Pipers, and this is true with all the Piper low-wing family here, is that people are a little stuck on the whole concept that these aircraft were basically engineered and designed to be landed pretty flat. And the reason people got that idea is because they were always using 2 clicks of flaps instead of all 3 clicks of flaps. When you do that, when you come in for a landing, the nose is like, if you look at kind of flat here, but this nose would be, like 6 inches off the ground, and you come in pretty easy. The problem with that is you're actually landing really hard, and if you look where the landing gear are connected here, you'll notice if you land hard, you're damaging your fuel tank that's inside of that casing. So it would cause all sorts of mechanical problems down the line, leaky fuel tanks and all that other stuff, if you hit the ground too hard with this plane. Again, no plane's perfect from an engineering perspective, but that was one of those kind of common things that people would run into and not think about. So it's a kind of a combination of sort of bad habits, but it looks so good when you land this thing all smooth. So one of the things you have to learn to do with this plane, especially if you're going to be careful with trying to maintain its life a little while, is you really got to hit that ground on the stall versus hitting the ground when it feels right. And I will show you exactly what I mean. There's Yukon off the nose, by the way. Once we get Boise, you'll see exactly what I mean as we kind of come here. So there's our lovely airport, Windham, Connecticut. Like I said, I've beat it. I've definitely given that particular chunk of tarmac quite a bit of abuse here. And what we're doing now is we're just circulating, I like that, circling very, very gently around the airport for the purposes of kind of losing a little bit of altitude here so we can go ahead and execute our landing approach. Now, of course, for us, because we're so much above the traffic pattern, we're in a pretty safe spot. But in the real world, of course, when we're trying to sneak into this traffic pattern from altitudes like this, we'd have to be very, very mindful. Now, this is basically a perfect right downwind here, but we're a little bit too high to execute that right downwind. Safer thing to actually do would be to come around here, cut across here, or even do one of these like that. Personally, this is pretty safe because we have plenty of room to use. Coming in like this, that feels like something a Cirrus pilot would do. But people know that reference pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and execute my gentle right turn here. We're about 3,500. Traffic pattern altitude at Windham, of course, is 1,247 feet, which is, nobody flies that traffic pattern altitude unless you're one of those people. Everybody uses 1,300 feet. And all I'm doing, like I said, is executing this nice, gentle turn. For the sake of visibility, of course, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop fuel pump already flipped on. I'm going to flip on my landing light just to kind of let everybody know that I'm in the vicinity. And we're just going to go ahead and kind of execute my little turn here. Get a little fast and pull the nose up, power back just a tiny bit. So as we're descending, of course, as I mentioned previous video, I'm going to go ahead and re-enrich the mixture here. We don't really want to be landing lean. That's kind of dangerous, to say the least. And of course, we want to be contacting the good folks down at Windham Ground. There's no tower here or anything like that. Just giving them a little heads up what we're kind of up to. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm going to finish up my circle and get us across the runway. There we are. So now this aircraft in the traffic pattern is quite a peach. It's nothing too scary. It's nothing too aggressive. The big thing with it, though, is the trim is goofy. And by goofy, that's a technical term simply saying that whenever you put anything to do with flaps or speed, expect to have to do a really big double handful of trim with this particular plane. The good news is one of the things they teach you when you're learning this is the easy landing method with this plane. And we'll show you both the easy landing method as well as kind of, not the preferred, but the Piper's recommended way. And it's a slight difference between the two, but you'll see what I mean. So what we're going to do is we're going to enter by crossing the midfield here, right on the into a downwind for runway 27, which is just sort of chilling below us. I'm 100 feet above field elevation, which is intentional. Is anybody doing gliders today? No, but apparently somebody's got a jet. It's got propellers. Never mind. I was kind of curious about that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to cross midfield here and kind of settle into a very nice one. This aircraft is very much a numbers aircraft, which I think is really good about it. So about 2,000 revolutions per minute, comrades. Home Depot, wow, it's really busy at Home Depot for, then it is. It is the Christmas season, so maybe everybody's buying some home goods and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and cross over. And we're going to execute our little transition here and get us ready for flying into 27 here. Go ahead and pull that nose up. Be careful on the turn here because you're going to slow down pretty dramatically. And you'll know what I mean the first 50 times that you do it. There we go. And it looks pretty good to you. I'm just going to let the nose come down just a little bit. That looks pretty good to me. Right foot. There we go. Nice. So looking at my window here, we're just going to line ourselves up with the end of the runway, and we're going to do the lazy landing method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull 2 clicks of flaps. I'm going to take my RPM and drop it to 1,800 feet, push the nose down, 500 feet per minute. That's it. That's all you have to do. And now we have a stabilized landing approach. So when people first see that, of course, they don't believe me, until they finally go ahead and try it themselves. They get their 1,500 feet per minute. They set about 1,800 revolutions per minute, and that's it. And you could just enjoy this nice, relaxing descent. You can take your time, look out the window. You can see that we crossed the 45 here. You go ahead and execute your base turn here. Big amount of rudder with this plane. That was a really big shock for me the first time I flew it also. And you execute your nice, gentle turn. Come swinging around. Everything's looking pretty groovy here. One of the things you're doing, of course, is look at this. We can see out the window now. So we go ahead and execute. We steepen that turn just a little bit up to 30 degrees, which is a little extreme if you ask me, but it's perfectly fine. And you just kind of hold that in there to get 1,800 RPM and 2 clicks of flaps. And we kind of come rolling out here. And there's my runway. I'm a little high. I'm going to go ahead and reduce power just a little bit here. We're going to let this thing come in. So now 2 clicks of flaps. So this plane is a little different. Now I noticed that I cut my throttle and I'm still coming in pretty high and I'm also still pretty steep. So I can actually go ahead and slip the plane. There we go. And that's all about as much energy as I needed to suck out of this plane. And we are fields made. That's one of the most fascinating things about this plane is I'm doing 72 right now and I know I can get all the way down to the field without too much drama. Go ahead and pull back. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at one of the very Piper kind of things here. Maybe have just a tap of power here. I don't want to get too slow. 65 to 70 is a lot safer than 60, trust me. So we're going to go ahead and do the first landing they always show everybody. And that's going to be, I call it kind of the flat landing. And we're just going to be nice and flat, and we're just going to settle the plane onto the ground just like this. Now that was a very flat landing, and I hope everybody could kind of see exactly. Everybody's like, are you going to go around? I'll do it, don't worry. Notice how all 3 of my wheels basically hit the ground at the same time there. And the other thing you probably notice is there was quite a bit of, not hesitation, but there was a lot of energy that kind of went down. And my airspeed was actually still relatively high when, of course, I smacked myself on the ground. Now, if you do landings like that, it really makes it a lot easier to see out the nose of the plane. Everything's nice and stable. There wasn't not a lot of drama there as far as getting it down. People like that landing. But there are a couple problems. The first problem is you probably observed that I landed way past the 1,000-foot point. Now, this is not a 172 with 40 degrees of flaps. This is very much a Piper Warrior 2. So we are going to need more landing, basically hover mode, in order to get ourselves to the correct position of the runway. But the big thing here is we came down hard and we landed really far. That is not going to be a desirable condition if we're trying to land the plane. First of all, I'm landing it in a way that's not going to be stressing out our heavy fuel tanks. But the other thing, of course, is we sucked up a lot of room in that particular landing. One of the downsides of having only 2 clicks of flaps. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get us in position once more. But this time what we're going to do is bring it down a little differently. All right, so we're cruising around in downwind. We're going to do it slightly differently this time. What we're going to do is we're going to be using all of the flaps available to us. And what's going to happen is we're also going to go ahead and force the aircraft to do a stalled landing as opposed to that little thing that we just did a few moments ago. Now, this is going to require a little bit more work on our part as far as getting the plane settled. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the throttle back. I'm going to go ahead and click in 3 snaps of flaps. When you do that, of course, this plane goes, oh! you basically get pushed up against your harness there. Now, one of the things that Just Flight doesn't do well, in my opinion, again, they've done so many things well in this plane so far, is the trim. That's just not how hard I have to push to get. It's almost like it's oversensitized. Like I don't have to push the controls hard to make this plane do what I want. Notice, by the way, now that I'm sitting here at 3 clicks of flaps, I'm getting 70 knots and I'm getting 2,000 RPM to give you an idea of just how much more drag we get here. So I'm going to go ahead and take my turn and notice that I'm at a much better speed here. I'm at 70 knots already, which is pretty close. But the other thing notice is my flight feet per minute are perfectly fine, and my RPM slightly higher, which means I'm slightly better stabilized for my actual approach here before I kind of come swinging around. So I'm going to go ahead and now look at this thing. Oh my God, it feels like we're just dropping here. Go ahead and aggressively apply trim there. We're getting up to about 70 knots. And again, 70 is a pretty safe speed for this plane. We can 66 is considered the approach speed if you look at the book, but that's perfectly fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull us to final. Now, one thing that shocked me when I first learned to fly this plane is how much rudder you need to use in this thing. It's amazing. This is not a 172. And I'm looking at my nose here, and I can see that I'm basically at 66 knots already, which is a little fast. Actually, basically perfect. What am I saying? And one of the things you want to do with this plane, and this is more so in the sim, is get the trim set correctly. I can't say this enough. Once you have it on about the speed you need, which is what we have it on. See how it's wobbling? Very realistic, by the way. It's about 67. Everything's stable. Speed is good. We're slightly high. That is basically textbook. And notice how it's wallowing a little bit, so that's desirable. Get your trim set correctly here. You won't be able to do the next phase. 67. Oh my gosh, we're doing commercial flying now. I love it. So there's a big old number 27. Everything's looking groovy. We're going to go ahead and pull the throttle back, and we're going to coast it in. But we're going to do differently this time. I'm going to go ahead and I'll pull the nose up, and we're not going to let the plane land. Do not let the plane land. Wait for the sound. That is correct. That is the way that you want to get this plane down on the ground. You want to make sure it's basically not wanting to fly, and then you plant it. Notice, by the way, the total distance to stop this plane was negligible because of how much it did. Did you notice how high the nose was compared to when we did the original landing there? That is the way you want to put this thing on the ground. And also notice that even though it looked like things weren't going so well for us, we set this thing down very, very gently without any issues. So we actually landed short of our previous position, number one. And number two, we also landed in a much better attitude. The plane actually basically hovered there. Now, one of the things you did not see when I was approaching there is how much work I was fixing with the actual trim. So if you look down, you'll notice my nose up trim is almost a quarter of the way up, just for the purposes of stabilizing that. Now, on the real boy, you don't have to do that. You have plenty of control with this particular plane. But because of the way that Just Flight chose to kind of model it, you have to kind of work it if you want to try to land it smoothly like that. Now, there's one more thing that I want to show you, of course, other than going around, which you have to, because that's, one of those things you learn, so to speak, is the concept of over-rotating. That's one of those things that I can't emphasize enough with anybody with an all-moving tail, is how easy it is to basically overdo the pull-up on part of the takeoff. So I'm going to go ahead, tap that brake there. We're going to get ready for a short field takeoff. We're going to do 1-2 clicks of flaps, and we're going to go settle onto the runway. And oh man, the amount of times I've done this is just embarrassing. So I'm going to go ahead and line myself up here and get ready to demonstrate this particular purpose. Go ahead and kick the nose over just a little bit. And we're ready to go. Nice. Go ahead and tap the brake. Delightful. So one of the things I have to do, of course, is I have to fix my trim. Because otherwise, the nose will basically boing, and I'll have you out of control here. Delightful. So what we're going to do is a short field takeoff, and I'm going to demonstrate what happens if you try to get the plane going before it's ready to get going. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little bit of nose up here. I'm going to do full power, wait for it to go. It crouches, by the way, and it starts to go skirt, skirt, skirt across the ground. Let go. Now watch this. Notice my airplane is... There it goes. Whoa. Whoa. What's it doing? I want to go in the air. Whoa. What do we do? Whoa. Every flight instructor on Earth just said, it felt like as if a million landing gear were screaming. So the reason I showed you that is it's really, really important to know that you should not pull back until you get to the speed where the plane can get airborne. Otherwise, you end up with that little drama, which could potentially destroy you and the airplane. Now, there's one more thing we have to demonstrate, of course, and that's a go-around, because this aircraft is not different, it's just pipery. There we go. We're all nice and lined up. Speed is good. Our flaps are deployed. Everything is looking really groovy here. Now, one of the interesting things you probably have observed is at no point did I activate the carburetor heat. As a matter of fact, if you look at the book will say carburetor heat, quote, as needed. And it's just a situation when you're in when you're in an environment where carburetor ice is very common, use carburetor heat. Otherwise, you leave it alone. So we have ourselves fairly stabilized. You can see it's doing the Piper wobble where it kind of wanders back and forth. By the way, when you go to use the rudder pedals in this plane the first time, you have to push the rudder so far to get the nose to move. And we're looking pretty good. We're getting a little fast. I'm going to go ahead and pull the throttle back. Looking pretty good. Hey, do you see that guy on the right side of the runway? Dude, glider. Hey, glider guy. Don't get on. Oh, jerk. Full power. What we're going to do is we're going to level off. We're going to wait until we get positive rate of climb, and we're going to bring up one click of flaps. We're going to wait until we get over 70. We're going to bring up our second click of flaps. We'll wait until we get a little faster, bring up our third clicks of flaps very gently. And we're just going to go ahead and translate from our VX if we needed it to our VY, which again was about 79 knots. And now we basically start our climb out, making sure all of our switches are in the correct position. Now, you'll notice there was not a lot of drama with that go-around. A lot of times when we go around, of course, especially with the 182 with a bunch of people in it, it's just like, huh? As far as performance goes. This thing's actually pretty peppy. But remember, it's also like 0 degrees on the Celsius scale right now, and it's just me flying. I'm not flying with a co-pilot or anything. So hopefully you found this series interesting. The Piper Warrior is a neat plane. The folks at Just Flight did a pretty good job. There's a lot of little things I'm like, but they got a lot of the little details right that other folks don't get. But it's a neat plane. Do I recommend this plane? I'm not reviewing from a sense. When it comes to planes like this, you really have to ask yourself, would you rather get this one with 161 horsepower, or would you rather get yourself something a little more powerful like one of the Archer family, which has the 180 horsepower? Me personally, I like something that's got a little bit more get up and go because it's going to give you a better flexibility when it comes to operations. You also tend to have slightly newer and nicer avionics kind of a thing on board as well. And of course, there's also the Aero series, which are the Piper Archers with retractable landing gear. They're really good getting used to retracting landing gear airplanes. But like I said before, my first few adventures with this thing were kind of a lot of fun. I remember landing this thing for the first time and thinking the plane was never going to land because, of course, you come in too fast, you're not paying attention, there's no extra weight in the plane, and, you think you're going to die, you're going to run out of runway, and everything turns out fine. And it's kind of fun because even though I don't fly Warriors anymore like I did at one point, I still basically take care of the Piper family and flying the Archer a little later on. But for that, enjoy.